If you've ever tried to lose weight, you know that the hardest part is keeping it off long term. And chances are you've had some short term success. You've maybe lost 5, 10, 20, in some cases, even 50 pounds. But on a long enough time horizon, you slip back into old habits, put the weight back on, and end up where you started. And in this little podcast with my good friend Peter, we dive into how to lose weight sustainably using biblical principles. Right now, real quick, if you're not familiar with me, my name's Yochheim. I'm the co-owner of defaultkings.com. We're an online fitness coaching company for men, and we've helped guys lose anywhere from 10 to 188 pounds and build the consistency to keep it off long term. And that's been going on since around 2019. So if you want to go check out some of the work that we've done, that way you know that you can trust my perspectives on this, and I've been through this with real people. You can, of course, go to our website and look into that for yourself. And in regards to this podcast with Peter, I clip up the first half. It's about an hour and a half, but the first 45 minutes or so is really just fitness centric, and that's the majority of my audience. Now, for those of you that are maybe business owners or entrepreneurial, or you want to actually learn a little bit more about our company specifically from a business side of things, I'm going to link in the description the video that Peter posted to his channel, because that will be the full conversation where in the back half we get into some kind of deep business discussion and tactics and things like that that may not apply to my entire audience. But if it does, feel free to go check that out. And on this channel, I'll keep it more fitness centric for you guys. So hope you enjoy. If you like the video, you like the podcast, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, do all the YouTube stuff, and send it to somebody that could benefit from it. Thanks.
Joey Yochheim, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks, man. You said it right.
I said it right. Yeah, I did a little research prepping for the podcast. So I at least try to get the guest's name right, even if it's kind of like one of those ones where it's spelled like there's 3 different pronunciations you think it could have. But yeah, man, it's good. What is a default action?
Default action, the easiest way to think of it is just a subconscious habit. That's the easiest way to think of it. So the easiest comparison that we've always drawn for guys over the years is you think about something like brushing your teeth. You know, maybe when you were a kid, your mom had to remind you to do it, but now you're a grown man and you don't really think about brushing your teeth. Hopefully you just kind of do that automatically. So it's one of those things that's just ingrained at a subconscious level. It's something that, again, you default to.
And this is like a big focus of your approach to kind of the fitness industry, right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah. I mean, and I'm sure we're going to get into this quite a bit, but I mean, generally with the fitness industry, kind of the nature of a situation like weight loss, where generally that applies to people who have struggled with things like impulse, the usual solution is something that's quick, when in reality, the actual true solution is going to be actually changing the behavior and changing the patterns that somebody's developed over time. So their typical reaction is, hey, I'm overweight. What's the fastest way to fix this? When in reality, it's more of a long game of actually building, again, how we refer to it as default actions, actually building habits, changing behaviors. That way it lasts. And that's why you see so many people do some sort of diet or some sort of injection or surgery even, and they'll literally gain the weight back after doing that.
Yeah.
Because they didn't actually change the behavior problem.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I've got a personal friend of mine. He's struggled with his weight for a little while now, and like years ago, he was actually jacked. He was like a fitness influencer on Instagram, but he just had some stuff he hadn't dealt with, like with kind of his eating habits and I mean food addiction really, and so that caused him to, as soon as he couldn't like just like floor it on fitness stuff, as soon as he had to like kind of, I guess, like diversify into other areas of life too, then that causes weight to start to go up. And, fast forward to today, and he put on well over 100 pounds in the past years. But, it's been really, really cool. Starting in, I think like January of 2024. So I guess about a year now, he's been like actually dealing with that stuff. And he's been kind of like documenting the process too, which has been really cool to like watch. And I've been really proud to see it. But with the guys that you're working with, is that kind of the common situation? Like they've been in better shape before, it just wasn't able to stick?
Yeah, it's the usual case, right? And honestly, we typically don't have a lot of guys come through that are like 300, 350, 400 pounds. Like we don't have a lot of, quote unquote, morbidly obese cases,
Sure.
to be honest with you. I think that's kind of the nature of just how we market. We're targeting business owners and things like that. And again, broad generalization, but typically a guy that's a business owner or an entrepreneur or in a leadership position, generally the alarms are going to sound when they get close to 300 pounds. So we don't typically deal with like the morbidly obese cases. Usually it's a guy who was in shape, has been an athlete before, even in some cases.
Mm-hmm.
And they just slowly started to put the weight back on over years of having more responsibility, whether that's through work, whether that's through getting married, having kids, etc. So yeah, generally guys have been in shape before. They've put the weight on. They're getting to that point where the alarms are ringing, but they're not ringing to the extent of them being morbidly obese in most cases. A lot of those morbidly obese cases are guys that, man, that's how it's been their whole life, right?
Yeah.
It's not a new problem generally in those cases.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, how do you change your defaults, especially like in that situation as an entrepreneur? Like, yeah, there's a lot of responsibility on your shoulders. I mean, I'm starting to feel it. Like I'm in my early 20s. I don't even have kids yet or anything, but it's even getting harder for me now with a business and a wife and family duties and stuff. So like what's the approach for somebody who's looking to change those default settings?
The approach is really a psychological approach. The angle we attack it from, though, is spiritual. Obviously, we're like a Christian-based company. A lot of our clientele are obviously Christians and
Mm-hmm.
believers of the book. So we're people of the book around here for sure. So we attack it through a spiritual lens, but I can kind of give you both angles, like the psychological principles behind it and then the spiritual principles behind it. I think psychological is a little bit easier for a broader audience to understand first. Psychologically, I mean, we root this in the idea that ultimately all of our behaviors are a result of beliefs that we hold or identities that we hold about ourselves. The easiest example that I use is if somebody believes they have the fat gene, their actions are going to be, hey, I don't work out, hey, I'm going to eat like crap, because they believe they have the fat gene. So why would they behave in a way that's different than that? Because they're behaving that way, they're then over fat, right? So you have belief, action, or default action in our case, belief, default action, outcome. And the reality is that's a very deadly cycle, right? If somebody's belief is I have the fat gene, so they don't work out, they don't eat right, and then they're over fat. Well, now the outcome's just reinforcing the initial belief. And it's just a feedback loop that continues over time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like the psychological angle. The way that you can look at this as well through a spiritual lens, I like to compare this just personally to a time in my life where I didn't have Christ at the center. Right? And because I didn't have that identity in Christ, because my beliefs weren't exactly aligned with what the book says, what was my behavior? Not good, right? And as soon as I changed the identity, place the identity in Christ, change the beliefs around how I look at the world, my behavior changes, my outcomes change, it reinforces it. So you can look through the psychological lens, or you can look through the spiritual, more Christian contextual lens. We used to look purely through the psychological lens 2-3 years ago when we started the company. And then as we've just become more outspoken about our own beliefs, we've obviously started to attack it through more of a spiritual lens, especially with a lot of Christian-based clientele coming through as well. They generally receive that better, right? That feels more like ironclad than psychology, especially for believers of the book.
Yeah, absolutely. I was reading something online the other day. It said the average male is around 30 pounds overweight. How do you think things have gotten this bad?
I'm actually surprised. I figured that was actually kind of a low ball. I would think it's actually higher.
Interesting. Yeah.
I wrote a thread on this on Twitter quite a while ago. Now we have a team that helps us out with content quite a bit. But like back in the day when I was just doing all of it, there was a very specific thread. It did all right. It wasn't one of my like bangers, but it did pretty good. But the reason it didn't do as good is because it was very like micro in the weeds, kind of nerdy fitness stuff. The short and simple answer is we eat more and we move less. Right? That's how it got that bad. There's really only two variables. There's one equation when it comes to gaining weight. It's just if you're in a caloric excess, you're going to gain weight. That's it. Right? That's it. It's the only formula. People will tell you it's hormones and all this stuff. In some rare cases, maybe. But the simple formula is if you eat more than you burn, you will gain weight. Right? The only way that you can change that equation is by moving more, aka burning more calories, or consuming less calories. And we've done both of those things in the wrong direction as a society. Culturally, in the last 100 years, we have less manual labor jobs, right? People are generally less active as a whole. So they're burning less calories than they ever have because it's just the age of technology. We're more sedentary and we're eating more than we ever have. So you have both opportunities are going in the wrong direction, which is what's caused this. The food is more calorically dense than it ever has been. Portion sizes are bigger than they ever have been. people's impulse controls is worse than it ever has been. Again, probably largely due to technology. People get dopamine so fast, you can just flick on your phone a few times and you have dopamine on command, right?
Yeah.
So moving less and eating more than we ever have, both things are going wrong. That's how we got here, right? Ultimately.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Cause I mean, even if you look at like even blue collar guys, like they're moving less than they used to, like quite a bit, because they've got a lot of machines and tools that do a lot of the work for them. I mean, in a lot of blue collar industries, you're almost more of a machine operator than you are an actual like laborer. And then more of us are sitting at desks than we used to be. That makes a ton of sense. So I guess what are the consequences that you're seeing with guys who like have a lot of responsibility in their life and they're kind of, they're carrying around an extra 30, 40 pounds? Like what happens?
The general consequences are usually ones that, sneak up on you from like a marketing perspective. If we're looking through that lens, obviously what you'll
My
see
favorite perspective.
yeah. Yeah. I was just saying, is your audience mostly business owners, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So like we can look at this through like a marketing lens. What you're going to hear is obviously the extreme stuff, right? And even I do this, as I should, as is my moral obligation as a marketer, right? You obviously have the extreme ends of the spectrum that are like, hey, heart attack, cancer, etc. Now, what's the statistical probability that somebody who's 30 pounds overweight, just 30 pounds overweight, is going to drop dead of a heart attack? It's statistically, realistically, it's not that high, but it is higher than somebody who wasn't 30 pounds overweight, right? So generally, it's not some extreme case, right? We don't have a lot of guys coming to us that are like, hey, man, I just had a heart attack. I barely survived. I'm trying to fix this. It's guys that are aware that statistically they're in a worse position than they would be if they were just at a healthy body weight. So how those consequences generally come to fruition, you have like the immediate stuff, which is, clothes don't fit anymore, right? You see an old picture of yourself, you don't look as good as you used to. The energy levels are low. Just overall, the level of respect that you have for yourself drops because you haven't been keeping promises to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You said you're going to go to the gym, you didn't. You said you said you're not going to eat the sweets, you did, right? And so generally, just the level of self-respect that you have drops, which naturally causes other people to respect you less because one, they see it on you, you wear it. It's one of those sins that you wear, right? Gluttony and sloth, you wear that one. So everybody sees it, and also they feel it from you. They feel how you feel about yourself because you've historically disrespected yourself by not keeping promises to yourself, right? So those are the general like consequences that drive guys to us, right? Of course, you have the long-term potential health implications, but the immediate ones are those.
Yeah. Yeah. I was going to ask about the self-respect or like the confidence thing. Cause I know like for me, that's been the biggest thing I've noticed like over times that my fitness has kind of ebbed and flowed. It's like when I'm in better shape, I feel better about myself. I respect myself more. And I feel like, at least for me, I won't speak to anybody else, but like, I feel like when you have that little bit of insecurity that causes you to act out in certain ways that are completely unrelated to that particular insecurity. Right. So like what's the difference then that guys are seeing when either when the weight comes off or like they replace it with muscle or they're just like they're kind of back to that better shape that they wanted to be in?
I think the immediate benefit and also why I think we prioritize results so early, and anybody that's done any inkling of like how to fulfill a service, it's like let's get wins early.
Yeah.
Uh, the biggest reason we prioritize it is the same reason you prioritize it again in any industry that's service based is there's an emotional snowball that occurs when somebody gets results where going back to that kind of flow of how things happen, belief, action, outcome, if they start to get the outcome, you're warping the beliefs. They start to believe it's possible. They double down. Their behavior continues to change. So I'd say the biggest win that guys get immediately is they just have evidence that they're doing the right thing. And they have evidence that they're keeping a promise to themselves. They said they were going to do something and they're actually doing it. I think that's the biggest benefit. Now, on a long time horizon, when now they're down 30 pounds as opposed to that first 5 or 10, again, it kind of goes back to the opposite of what was bad, right? The clothes are fitting good now. The energy levels are high now. The way they feel about themselves in front of others and the way they conduct themselves as a leader, whether that's in the workplace or in the home, starts to change because of how they feel about themselves, right? So I'd say the immediate benefit is just pushing that snowball down the hill and getting it started. That way they have some idea of an outcome or some idea of a result that can double down on the new identity, new beliefs, new actions that they've been working on.
Yeah, I like what you're saying about like the self-respect coming back faster than the pounds fall off. Because that's so true. It's like you could be, 100 pounds overweight and you see that first like 5 or 10 start to come off and you see yourself moving in that positive direction. And it's like it's just such a high, right? So I guess is it better like for as far as like entrepreneurial performance and kind of like overall performing well in life, is it better for guys to be like jacked, or is it better to just like, have a reasonable amount of muscle with kind of a lower body fat percentage?
Hey, real quick, if you're a Christian entrepreneur, business owner, or professional, and you're wondering how you could lose 10 to 50 pounds by working with me and my team directly, all you need to do is click the link in the description below where it says book a free fat loss assessment and schedule the next available time to talk with either myself or somebody on my team. And if you're curious to just learn a bit more about us before you do that, you can go directly to defaultkings.com and look around at some of our reviews, some of our testimonials, and some of the results that we've produced for guys just like you. And on that page, you can, of course, still book that free assessment. So hope you're enjoying the podcast. Hope you enjoy the rest of the conversation with Peter. And again, if you feel called to potentially work with myself or my team directly at Default Kings, book that free fat loss assessment or go to our website and learn more about us. Thanks. Enjoy the rest of the pod. The answer for that is one, it's going to be case by case, right? It's not a black and white answer. If I were to give you a straight one, I would say it's whatever is most sustainable for that person, which generally, of course, means it's not just being like super jacked all the time.
Yeah.
Right. But there's some guys that do it, man. I mean, our average client spends, 3 to 5 hours a week training, but we have the few kind of former meatheads that had to get the weight back off who love training. And they're like, dude, I want to train 2 hours a day, 5 days a week. I'm like, I don't even do that. But if you want to do it, sure, go ahead.
Yeah.
Right. So the answer that we aim for with like any kind of question like that is just have to figure out what is most sustainable for that person. What can you actually stick to the longest? If that means, hey, let's get to 25 BMI, let's get to like 15 to 17% body fat, where at those two metrics, we generally know our health indicators are going to be fine, as opposed to, getting super jacked and getting to like 10% body fat where you look sick and it's an awesome accomplishment, but the typical human's not going to be able to hold that for very long. There's some freaks that can do it and there's some people that enjoy it. But again, I coach this stuff and I don't even enjoy it enough to the degree to be able to do that or sustain that. So generally speaking, it's the lesser results is what's better for most people. But if you can sustain the better, like higher level results, be my guest, right? Be my guest.
Yeah, I feel like that's the transition I've had to make mentally because like when I first started working out in college, like my goal was just to be as jacked as possible, obviously. Like I saw all the student athletes working out and a couple of the basketball guys were like super built, which is kind of weird. You don't normally see that in basketball. But,
Yeah.
but yeah, then I started my business and it's like, okay, I literally can't work out 2 hours a day. And even on a day where I have that amount of time, I'm just like zapped the rest of the day. It takes me away from anything else that I'm supposed to be doing. So, I guess I want to get into kind of like the kind of proper protocols or advice for entrepreneurs who are trying to like stay relatively fit. And I also want to talk about the business side of what you've got going on over at Default Kings, because I think this is super cool. Let's start with the protocols. I guess it sounds like there's kind of three main buckets that you guys tackle. It's like the training, the nutrition, and the mindset. Is that right?
Yeah. Yep.
So I guess, probably the first thing that needs to come is the mindset. We talked a little bit about like shifting beliefs, but like, how do you actually shift your like base beliefs about who you are and what you're capable of?
Mm-hmm. It's kind of the woo woo that you get in entrepreneurship when you're first getting started of like, you have to do your like affirmations. You have to write it on, write it on a sticky note and put it on the mirror. You do kind of have to do that to a degree at the beginning, right? Like you have to, one, identify what are the kind of negative beliefs that you have, what are the negative self-identities that you have that cause you to behave that way. So I used the fat gene example earlier, but it could be any kind of negative self-connotation or self-belief. And the initial thing that you have to do is take a leap of faith and believe the woo-woo stuff that it's going to work, just to be super straightforward, right? Like you have to reverse that and say, no, I don't have the fat gene. Even if you look in the mirror and you have evidence to believe that you do, you have to just put your foot down and draw the line in the sand and say, I don't. Once you've done that, again, your behavior is going to now change. And assuming you just change your behavior long enough to get the ball rolling down the hill, which honestly can happen within a week, you're going to start to see progress. And then you're going to actually have evidence that that is not true anymore. Oh, wait, I don't have the fat gene. I can see that I lost 5 pounds this first week. 2 weeks go by. Oh, I'm down 7, 8 pounds. You start to actually have evidence. So at first it is a leap of faith, like from a mindset shift perspective, you have to have that leap. And then you start to compile evidence that proves it to yourself. And that's when it really starts to occur.
Mm-hmm.
Because those behaviors become a part of your lifestyle, right? Because those behaviors become a part of your lifestyle, you have the evidence and it becomes part of the day to day.
Yeah, the evidence reinforces the belief, and then it just like keeps snowballing. Yeah, there's something I've been chewing on for a while that I've been trying to like kind of wrap my mind around, because like there's certain instances where it's actually better to believe something that you're not really even sure is true, because it's more like it may not be, you don't think it's factually true in your life, but it's more useful in your life to believe that thing. Like if you're, I mean, just a very simple example is like if you're having a bad day and it just feels like everything is going against you, like tell yourself you're having a good day. And like that's not factually true, but it's useful because it's going to change the way you think about it, and it's going to change the way you act for that remainder of the day where you're just like super stressed and tired and beat up. And I think the same can go for fitness. It sounds like that's kind of what you're talking about here with from a fitness standpoint. It's like you may have evidence in the mirror saying you have the fat gene. You can't be fit. You're just going to look like this and feel like this forever. But if you can believe the thing that you don't think is factually true yet, but just choose to cling on to that because it's useful, then you'll start to get that snowball, and then it becomes factually true, right?
Yeah, and it's hard to do if you've had years or decades of, again, compiling evidence that says otherwise. And that's why the initial part of it is a leap of faith, right? And that's for any change you're trying to make. You get into marketing and sales here. It's like you have to shift somebody's worldview and beliefs enough about whatever it is, one, that you're offering, two, but also their own interpretation of the world. You have to shift it enough to get them to change their behavior if you're in a coaching industry, right, or a service-based industry. That's what you have to do. And so generally they have to be in enough pain to do that. You know, there's guys that inquire about working with us, and, you know, we have the initial conversation, the initial assessment, and it's evident to me that they're not in enough pain to change. I'll turn them away.
Yeah.
Like it has to actually be enough to be able to take the leap of faith. And most guys that are willing to sign up for a coaching program, willing to go that far, they're willing to be like, all right, well, you know, I signed up, I bought this thing, I'm going to take it and do it to the furthest degree that I can. And if that entails me putting up the sticky notes for a week, not that we actually do that, I'm just using that as a metaphor.
Yeah.
If that entails me putting up the sticky notes for a week and taking a leap of faith, I'm so fed up with where I am right now that I'll do it.
Yeah.
Generally, if people aren't at that point, it's probably not going to work. Man, I've told people, and this is in some of my YouTube content too, like I've told people, like, dude, if you're not there yet, like you might just have to hit rock bottom and come back to me. Right? And that's okay. Right. I hate that for you because I've seen where that can go. Right? But that's the reality of behavior change a lot of times, is somebody has to get to that point where they themselves have concluded that enough is truly enough and they're willing to draw the line in the sand. And sometimes they have to get there themselves, right? More kind of bad stuff, like we talked about earlier, has to happen. Right. And unfortunately, man, in some cases, that is like the diabetic scare. That is the heart attack. That is these super potentially tragic events that could negatively impact you for the rest of your life. Some people have to get to that point, and it's unfortunate, but it's reality, right? For them to actually change.
Yeah. It's just, you got no other option but to change.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So that's kind of the mindset side of things. As far as training versus nutrition, like what's kind of the next thing to tackle, like next, I guess, order of priority for you guys?
In terms of order of priority, it depends where you're at in like the sequence, right? And I kind of like to lump like a fitness or a body composition sequence into like phase 1 is getting to a BMI of 25, and that's totally weight contingent. And then the second one is a body fat percentage of 15%. If you're in phase 1, you still don't have a 25 BMI. I think nutrition is like 80% of the priority, because you could have an awesome training regimen, but if you go home and eat 5,000 calories, it probably doesn't really matter, right? So I think nutrition is the bulk of it in that first phase. Once you get through that phase, then I think training becomes an even bigger part, because now we're even more focused on gaining muscle, and you're not going to be in a calorie deficit anymore because you're maintaining your weight. So it's easier to build muscle. It's kind of hard to build muscle in deficit. Just is. You can do it,
Yeah.
especially if you're new to resistance training. It definitely happens, but it's certainly not the most advantageous. Certainly not the most advantageous. So I'd say nutrition is the first order of operations.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So, I guess as far as entrepreneurs living kind of a busy lifestyle, a lot of responsibilities on their plate. How do you build out a nutrition regimen for somebody in that situation?
It has to work for the specific individual.
Hmm.
And the way that I've seen this done wrong, I think, is the way that I can answer it. The way that I've seen this done wrong is by attempting to create some specific meal by meal plan where you're going to have exactly this every single day for each meal,
Hmm.
because it just doesn't work. If you're an entrepreneur running any sort of business that's doing anything of significance, you are putting out fires. Random things come up. Your schedule changes. Right?
Yeah.
Now, if you're at like an enterprise level, right, and you're just like a venture capitalist, maybe that's different. But generally speaking, most entrepreneurs are in a position where you're putting out fires, your schedule is changing, it's erratic. So what are the odds that you have exactly 2 pieces of sourdough and 3 eggs and 4 ounces of sausage for breakfast and 8 ounces of ground beef and rice for lunch and then the perfect thing for dinner? It's very unlikely. So in terms of how we do it, it has to be sustainable for the person. And the most simple way we found to do that is you have to have a calorie total, you have to have a protein total, and you play between those bumpers. Right? We compare it to bowling. Like you go
Hmm.
put up your bumpers so you don't end up in the gutter. Right? One of the bumpers is a calorie limit, one of the bumpers is a protein minimum, and fill that however you please. That's honestly been the most successful thing that we've seen. We've tried macros, we've tried even calories only, going one step simpler.
Hmm.
People usually are very hungry if they don't get enough protein.
Yeah.
So we found that calories and protein is the easiest way to do it, as opposed to some specific meal by meal plan or some super tailored restrictive diet. It's just, dude, here's your calories, here's your protein, track it, go. That's it.
Yeah.
Hit
Okay.
it, air out.
First off, case in point, this is my lunch that I was eating right before we hopped on the call here. And for
Yeah,
those of you watching,
your 6 p.m.
this
lunch.
was at 5 p.m. my time.
I was just gonna say, yeah, 6 p.m. lunch. Yeah.
I was like, you know what? I got to make sure I don't pass out during this podcast. That was my priority for today. But yeah, that makes a ton of sense, and I definitely can relate to that. It's like kind of the schedule's kind of unpredictable. I guess one thing that's worked really, really well for me is, for whatever reason, I guess I'm just built different, but I have this amazing ability to just eat the same thing over and over and over and over again. And so my wife and I will meal prep like every Sunday or every Monday, and I'll legitimately have the same lunch for like a month straight. Now we won't do a month's worth of lunches, but we'll do just the same thing because it's easy. It's otherwise it just turns into decision fatigue, right?
Mhm.
So like the past 3 weeks I've been eating like the same taco bowl for lunch every day, and it's been fantastic. It's still delicious. But I guess, what are like some of the general like do's and don'ts that you usually recommend to guys? Like, I mean, are we talking, is it okay to skip breakfast, intermittent fasting, smoothies versus like solid calories? Talk to me about some of this stuff, like a little bit more tactical.
Yeah, so I'm an extremist, as any good business owner should be with
Mhm.
their solution. I'm an extremist where I say hit your calories and your protein. I don't care. I literally don't care. If a guy wants to intermittent fast, fine. I wouldn't recommend it, but fine. If a guy wants to do keto, fine. Again, I wouldn't recommend it for sustainability purposes, but
Mhm.
if that's what's working for you, go ahead. So the true answer literally is, I don't care what time, I don't care what. We're not like really, you know, sweating over a guy having seed oils or added sugars or any of these things that a lot of people commonly now attack.
Mhm.
Because 95% of our client pool is over a 25 BMI. They just
Mhm.
need to get the fundamentals of making sure we're not eating too much. They need to fix that before they
Yeah.
worry about meal timing, before they worry about seed oils and added sugars and all these different potential micro optimizations, right? The big force multiplier to getting to a healthy body weight is don't eat too many calories, get in a deficit. And if you want it to be better and more enjoyable, so you don't feel like you're starving, and you want to hopefully gain a little bit of muscle on the way down, or at least maintain the muscle that you have, eat enough protein. Right? Anything outside of those 2 rules, when a client asks, I go, I don't care. If you want my recommendation, I can give you specific recommendations, but as an overall rule, I don't
Mhm.
care how you do it. Right? I don't care how you do it. that might not be as specific as you wanted to go. If you have a specific like diet, I'm happy to go into that too, because there's definitely some stuff we can tackle there when it comes to like meal timing, intermittent fasting, keto, like my own extreme opinions on those. But tactically, we
Yeah.
literally keep it as simple as that, and I think that's why it works so well, is because it is so simple. And obviously, like we don't by any means charge a cheap ticket for our program, and so sometimes guys will get inside and it's like, paid this money to like just have you tell me to do calories and protein. And I'm like, well, you paid this much money for the result, and that's what's going to get you the result. And then they
Yeah.
do it, and they're like, yeah, it was worth it. Like, you can't find like you're not going to find a bad DK review. Like you can go look for it. You're not going to find it, right? It's not going to happen because it works so well. And so it's overwhelmingly simple to the point where people are confused usually when they first start, and then 2 weeks go by, a month goes by, and they're like, oh, this is really crushing. That's why the cost is that, right? Because of the results that it gets. So yeah, I keep it that simple, and our whole staff does as well.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's important. Like people like to come up with these really like elegant, complex solutions for any problem. But like at the end of the day, we got to be utilitarian, right?
Yeah.
Like there's limitations on what we can and can't do, especially for I mean, I can't imagine there's really anybody in your group for whom fitness is like their actual number one priority in life.
Yeah, no.
It isn't for me. I bet it's probably not for you until you get to the point where you're like too fat to, rep a fitness brand. But
yeah. Well, that's the fun part about being, owning a fitness coaching company is like I have this constant motivator to never lose it, of course, right? To never lose it. And I think you're right? Because I always use this lens of on the idea of like extreme diets that are hyper restrictive or even like extreme training regimens. I put out like a 75 hard hit piece this morning. Like I love people's desire to do something challenging, but man, it doesn't have to be.
Mhm.
It really doesn't, right? And that's why, like my kind of classic line, when somebody comes and they join the program, they're like, "Shouldn't I be working out more? Like 2 hours a day?" I was like, "Bro, I don't even do that. I don't even do that. I don't do that." And I've lifted weights for 10 years, and in that time period, I've always eaten the right amount of calories, and I've always had a high protein diet, and it's not hard. It's very easy. I weigh myself every single day. I have active hobbies. It's very simple. It's very, very simple. The hard and the complex part is keeping it simple. Because you're exactly right? People want to do all of this flashy stuff because it's sexy and it's new and it's unique. And there's kind of like a cultish vibe to each of those opportunities, right? It's like a minority group. You get a special attention, right? Like that's what it is. It's the same idea.
Yeah.
I'm going to put myself in this minority group of people, whatever label you want to slap on that. Now I'm going to get special attention. It's the same idea that we deal with, right? As a culture. And so it's the same idea when in reality, the best thing to do is just the very, very simple, straightforward thing that is calories, protein, weigh yourself, lift weights, and have an active hobby and walk. Like that's it, dude. If you do those 5 or 6 things right there, you'll be ahead of 95% of the population, if not more.
Yeah. There's like this toxic mindset that I feel like I have, and I think a lot of other entrepreneurs probably suffer from this too, where you feel like if you're not like continually working harder and harder and harder on something, you're not actually making progress on it. Where you can actually put in the same amount of effort over a long period of time. And like I know this to be factually true because I've done it. You put the same amount of effort in over time, and guess what? The results stack and you do better and better and better. You get better and better results. But there's this sense that that the work that needs to go into it needs to exponentially grow as results do. And I think that's just like, I mean, I guess how would you handle that?
If you're doing it right, it should be easier as time goes on. Right? That's my opinion, right? Like the hardest part, and this is very cliche, but it's very true, especially in fitness. The hardest part is starting. And I literally just messaged a client that signed up the other day before this. I was like, dude, I'm proud of you for just like putting your foot in the door. Right? He said, I'm on the field. Like he finally set up all the stuff. He's like, I'm finally on the field. I was like, dude, the hardest part is just getting on the field. Like you've already done the hardest part. And so as time goes on, it should actually get easier. Right? It should. And if I even look at this tactically in terms of like what I would generally do with a client, like tactically that should happen as well. right? We're going to be in the steepest deficit right when you start. And then once you get to goal body weight, we're going to increase your calories. Your life just got a whole lot easier. Now you're eating maintenance calories, right? You've been lifting weights for 3 to 6 months at this point. So now you're in the rhythm, you're in the flow. You don't get as sore anymore, right? Like it should not only mentally get easier as time goes on, it should also just genuinely from a physical and a tactical perspective, it should be easier as time goes on. So it's interesting because again, like you're saying, we have this tendency, especially as entrepreneurs, to think like I just have to go harder.
Yeah.
I'm
maybe
built different.
Maybe it's a sticky note I need to put on my mirror.
Yeah, it's like you don't need to go harder. You just need to do the right thing for a longer period of time. That's really what it is.
Yeah.
Right? It's you don't need to do anything more. Keep lifting weights and wait 5 years and wait 10 years. That's it.
Yeah.
You keep doing the same thing just repetitively over time.
I think you're right. I think it is an impatience thing because I'm also a very impatient person.
Yeah. Well, dude, an example I use with clients is if I look at a picture of myself from, let's say, like 2019. I started lifting in 2014. I was like 14 years old or whatever. I'm 24 for audience context here. Started lifting when I was 14. If I look at a picture of myself at 19, I'm 24 now, 5 years ago, I look infinitely better than I looked when I was 19. Even if I look at a picture of myself from 2 years ago, I look better than I did in 2019, but now I look better than I did 2 years ago. I've changed nothing. Still lifting weights, eating the right amount of protein based on what my goals are at the time, depending on whether I want to gain weight or lose weight, still eating high protein. I've changed nothing. I've just progressively overloaded for years and years. And I know in 5 years, I'm going to look even better than I do now. Right? Because it's just going to be me repeating the same exact things over time. So nothing has to change. You just have to keep doing it. And that's why going all the way back to the first question you asked me, like, what is a default action? That's why it's so important to actually make it a default action and make it a subconscious habit where it's just a part of who you are. It's a part of your day-to-day life. Because on a long enough time horizon, if you do that, again, you're going to be in a position where you're smoking 99.9% of people just because you've done it continually.
Okay, let's talk training because that's kind of the last aspect of the fitness side of things, and then I do want to get into the business. I think you're doing some really awesome stuff over at DK. So, I guess from a training perspective, where do you even start?
I like to keep training as like 3 very simple principles. You have form, you have intensity, and you have overload. Form is make sure you do the movement right. My rule of thumb is if you think you're doing it wrong, you probably are. So get a professional. It doesn't have to be me. Could be though. Go to defaultkings.com. I'm sure it'll be here somewhere, but it doesn't have to be me, right? Jokes aside, if you're worried about it, find somebody to help you. The second thing is intensity. And this is where you see people who have lifted weights for 10 years and look exactly the same. Because they're in there and they're going to what we call RIR 4 or above. So they're leaving 4 or more reps in reserve, RIR, reps in reserve. They're leaving more than 4 reps in the tank. The majority of that hypertrophy is actually occurring in the last 3 reps of the set, right? Within 3 reps of true mechanical failure, meaning you cannot move this weight safely, right? So those people that just aren't training intense enough, they're not actually even getting the benefits of muscle hypertrophy, right? They're moving, they're getting exercise, they're getting their heart rate up, they're burning calories, but they're not actually changing the way their body looks to the highest degree that they could, right? So you have form, you have intensity, then you have overload. Overload is progressive overload. You need to progressively be adding more load to what it is you're doing if you want to continue to progress. Right? And the way you do that is you have sets, you have reps, and you have weight moved. You multiply those 3 across, and that's how you get your total volume. That number needs to go up week in and week out. Of course, you need to deload every few weeks, but personally, I don't schedule deloads for myself and I don't schedule them for clients because life has a tendency to deal you a deload where, all of a sudden, all of a sudden it's the holidays and you didn't lift for a week. Whoops. Well, you deloaded. You don't need to schedule them. Personally, I don't think, unless you're at a professional level, right? Or you're at a competition level, like maybe you're powerlifting competitively. If you're bodybuilding professionally and you're not going to miss like that, then yeah. But general person, you don't need to schedule. Right? So you have form, you have intensity, you have overload. That's training in a nutshell, right? In a nutshell. And of course, this is me speaking through the lens of resistance training, which is our main priority with everybody. And resistance training can be defined as anything that causes there to be resistance through a specific range of motion for a muscle. You can do that with your body weight. You can do it with a kettlebell, a dumbbell, a band, whatever. Anything that's causing there to be resistance through a range of motion is resistance training. And you can apply those principles to any type of resistance training.
Do you have to do cardio to lose weight?
You don't have to. Is it beneficial because you're going to be burning more calories? Yes. Do I think cardio? Do I think you should be doing cardio for the purpose of losing weight in the beginning? Not necessarily. And the reason I say that is because, again, if you're in that phase one where you're not a 25 BMI yet, generally what happens is people are doing, like some sort of intense cardio and they're burning calories during that session. But if they get to a point where they're burnt out and they're tired of running on the treadmill and they stop doing it, they no longer have that, what I call like active calorie burn. Where if you resistance train and you build muscle, you're going to slowly accumulate passive calorie burn because muscle burns more calories at rest than fat, right? So I'm a huge fan of resistance training in the beginning. And if you're going to do cardio, you're just doing it to increase the calorie deficit that you have. But it's not necessarily the sustainability play, right? Which is why I say, yeah, you can do it. It just wouldn't be my main priority, right? It wouldn't be my focus. It's just bonus calories burned. If you're going to do cardio, I think you should just do it for the cardiovascular benefits, right? Do it for your heart health, right? But if you also lost 50 pounds, you'd probably do a lot of good for your heart too.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like it's a lot easier to not eat, 100 or 200 calories than it is to burn a couple hundred calories on the treadmill or something. But, definitely a useful tool. So, help me come up with a workout plan here, because I'm in a time of life where I can really only get to the gym about twice a week. I've got maybe I could be there an hour and a half. I've got a little bit of time. We usually go in the evenings. Right now I'm basically doing like an upper body, lower body split, and then like sauna afterwards for maybe 10 or 15 minutes. So like what should I be doing to like make the most of this gym time I've got?
What's your like resistance training experience?
I mean, I'm like, as far as like how long I've been I've been training since college. So since 2019, I guess. Okay. So what's that, like a little over 5 years?
Yeah. So you're more experienced than the average guy. The general rule of thumb to build, again, in this context, build a workout program that's geared towards gaining muscle, which again, even if you're trying to lose weight, I think you need to be training in a way where you're trying to put on muscle because you get the passive calorie burn over time, which makes it harder for you to gain the weight back long-term. Okay. So that's the context. Right. Generally, when you're like more of a beginner, and honestly, like we could even probably just lump you into this for the sake of the example, because that's most people, the typical target is you want to stimulate a muscle group twice a week. Right. So the way you're going to do that, if you only have 2 days a week, it's probably not going to be an upper lower split, because you're hitting upper once a week, you're hitting lower once a week. Mm-hmm. Right. So all those individual muscle groups are only going to hit once. Now, you're going to get some progress like that. But if you really wanted to optimize it, my recommendation and most researchers' recommendation would be, hey, let's hit those twice. If I were you and I only had 2 days a week, I would split that into just 2 total body days.
Okay.
Right? Which I'm not personally a fan of total body splits, but in the event that somebody only has 2 days, that's generally the go-to. Because if we do total body, we can hit all of those muscle groups twice, albeit it's maybe not optimal. It's maybe not as direct as we want it to be, but we have limited resources. We do what we can with the limited resources of 2 days. Now, with those total body splits, my recommendation, again, when you're pressed for time, is you need to prioritize the compound movements. You just have to. And compound movements, meaning movements where we're hitting multiple joint groups. So think about, your bench, your squat, your deadlift, your pull-ups, your rows. These are all the big compound movements that are hitting multiple muscle groups. And you spread that out across 2 days. That's going to be the best bang for your buck. Right? It's going to save you time. You're going to hit multiple muscle groups. And of course, you still have to prioritize the form, the intensity, and the overload. Mm-hmm. But that's how I would do it if I were you.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I've seen other people use like number of sets per week as the target rather than like number of times you're hitting it. But I mean, it gets pretty hard to hit like 12 to 15 sets on one muscle group in one workout. So it makes sense that you would want to do it as a full body day.
Yeah. And it can be tough to do. And like ultimately, again, it depends on where somebody's at in the spectrum of experience, right?
Mhm.
The greener you are, the newer you are, if you have any boomer listeners that maybe don't know what greener means, the greener you are to this, uh, the less stimulus you need to get results, right? It's just like any other stimulus that you're getting, right? It's like if you've never
Mhm.
had caffeine, the first time you have caffeine, you're like, holy crap, this is awesome. And then
Yeah.
a few months go by and you need 400 milligrams to feel anything. It's the same idea. That initial stimulus, even at once a week or even at 3 sets a week for that muscle group, we're going to start to see some progress, albeit not optimal, but we will get some. So again, the newer you are, technically the less you need to do, right? But then once you start going, you're going to typically need more stimulus over time to be able to see progress. Not to sustain results, right? Not to sustain results, but to progress,
Mhm.
right? To progress.
Mhm. What's your take on TRT? Because we've been seeing like a lot of like well-known entrepreneurs, like maybe business influencer guys. I mean, Cardone's definitely on it. Like Ryan Pineda just hopped
Yeah,
on in the last year. I think Jeff Bezos had like this amazing transformation a couple of years ago when he
yeah.
got on TRT. So like when do you think that's appropriate to start exploring for
You
a guy?
mean you mean Bezos's transformation doesn't look natural to you? What do you mean?
I have questions. Let's
Yeah,
just leave it
yeah,
at that.
yeah. In all seriousness, my take on TRT is take it if you need it, right? Like take it if you need it. It's testosterone. I'm not going to pretend to be some like chemical steroid expert. I'm not like Derek from More Plates, More Dates. I'm not even going to pretend to be that guy. I'm not that guy. Never claim to be. Not going to
Mhm.
pretend. But my general take is if you need TRT, take it, right? If you have
Mhm.
low testosterone, take TRT. If you can fix it naturally with some things, do that first. But if you need it, you can probably take it. And this is not medical advice. I'm not a medical professional. I'm just some guy that helps people not be fat, right? And that's my take. Right
Yeah.
now, here's the thing: people get impatient. Most people with low T, the reason they have low T is because they don't train, they eat too many calories, they sleep like crap, right? They don't take care of themselves. They don't take their vitamins. They don't ever see the sun. Their lifestyle's horrendous. And so they get on TRT to try to fix a lifestyle problem. Where in reality, if they just changed their lifestyle, waited 6 to 18 months, all of a sudden they'd have above average testosterone. But they'd rather take the injection and speed things up. And again, I've seen this time and time again. We have guys coming to our program, they've been blasting TRT for years and they look like crap because their lifestyle is crap. Now, if you pair a good lifestyle with TRT, yeah, you're going to look insane, dude. Yeah, you're going to look awesome. So if you have already done the lifestyle remedies that you need to do and you still have low testosterone, yeah, you could probably get away with taking TRT. Right? And I have no problem, even this is like kind of a side quest here, but it makes sense. I
Mhm.
have no problem, even with, honestly, this is going to sound crazy. In the right capacity, I have no problem with exogenous hormones and steroids. I have no problem. Just be honest about it.
Yeah.
Just don't liver king us, right? Don't say you're not doing it. Don't say you're not doing it and then do it. Especially if you're selling something that's fitness related, right? If I
Yeah.
ever went on any sort of, you know, situation like that, of steroids of any kind, of course I'm selling something that's related to that. I would just need to be upfront and transparent about it. But again, I don't care if somebody does that stuff. It's really not my business. But if you're gonna lie about it and sell something that benefits you because you have the steroids, that's a problem, right? That's an ethical problem. But yeah, does that answer your question for you?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people see TRT and like Ozempic kind of as a similar thing where it's like it like they see it as a shortcut
Yeah.
to a goal, which I'm obviously in a lot of cases it is, right? Because I think there's a lot of situations like you're talking about where people aren't doing the like immediate lifestyle remedies that you could do that would fix the problem on its own. Um, but also it's like there's tools that we have in our tool belt now because of modern medicine that are just like absolutely wonderful. And you wouldn't
Yeah.
say that like taking an antibiotic is a shortcut to like not being sick.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
so do you feel like that's kind of the same thing?
Yeah, it's one of those things where like I probably have maybe more nuanced take than your typical guy that's selling something that's a direct competitor to Ozempic. Where if you, yeah, because the right thing to do here is, Peter, tell you how terrible it is and how it's the worst thing in the world.
Mhm.
And again, if I'm looking through the sustainability lens, it's still not fixing the lifestyle. It's still not fixing behaviors.
Yeah.
Right? But if you said, hey, this guy's 400 pounds or 450 pounds or 500 pounds, give him semaglutide and help him lose 100 pounds in a year and maybe save his life. Yeah, I'd rather him do that than not. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So if I had to pick, I would say, yeah, do the injection, do the gastric, do these kind of quick fixes, quote unquote, do the liposuction. If your life is on the line, if you're morbidly obese, I think there's the gray in that discussion is, yeah, I know it's not sustainable, but him staying 450 pounds or 500 pounds and knocking on death's door every single day, that ain't great either. Should he change his lifestyle? Absolutely. Am I maybe okay in that situation with giving him a 100-pound head start? I mean, honestly, probably, yeah. But if he doesn't change his behaviors, if he doesn't change his default actions, alongside of it, he might end up right back there. And that's the problem. The problem isn't the Ozempic or the surgery. It's man, are they going to change their lifestyle alongside of it? And if they don't, then yeah, there's a chance we end up right back where we were. And in most cases, and this is just evidenced, most cases they do, right? Like 95% of weight loss solutions fail after 3 years because there's no behavior change. So it's a nuanced take. My answer should be no, Peter. Very bad. Don't do that. But if you're 500 pounds and you're literally on the brink of death every single day, I'd rather you do that than nothing. Okay. So that concludes the fitness portion of that conversation with Peter. And if you're somebody who wants to actually hear the back half where we dive into a little bit more personal life things and then also just business tactics on how we actually run my company, Default Kings, you're more than welcome to go listen to that full conversation on Peter's channel. Again, I'll make sure I link that in the description below. And if you're somebody who's watching this, who's enjoyed the actual fitness side of things, and you're curious to know more about how you could potentially work with me and my company directly, all you need to do is go to defaultkings.com and book a free fat loss assessment. And we'll walk you through how exactly we help guys lose anywhere from 10 to 30 pounds over the course of 12 weeks and set them up to keep it off long term. So hope you enjoyed the video. Again, if you enjoyed, like, comment, subscribe, do all the YouTube stuff, and send it to somebody that could benefit from it. Thanks.